Well, that's the jigsaw. I'm going to try, we're going to talk about another issue, which is group and presentation skills. So as you know, in our class, we do a lot of group work, but we also want our students to work together to create a presentation. So I wanted to share some of the resources and content related to group and presentation strategies, and that hopefully will be helpful to you as you think about how we can do our project the best in our classes. So I'm going to start off with the secret to what makes a group work well, and really the secret is making sure that students need each other. So you need that interdependence, you need that connection among group members, and you also need to have individual accountability. So you can't have social loafers. So the way that you structure the group really matters, and we're going to talk about ways that we can build in that individual accountability into the group work assignments. That will really help. The other thing you need to know is that training students on how to be functional in a group is very, very important. We can't assume that they know how. So as you know, there's some resources in the text that will help you teach students about how to function effectively in a group, whether it's in person or online, whichever way you want to do it. Lots of different strategies out there. So as you know, I talk about the 5R approach for group work. And the first thing is the students really do need to get to know each other. So although that takes a little bit of time, and you might need to give them some class time for this, it's an important part of the process to let them do a little bit of socializing, because you'll be more productive with people that you know than people you don't know. So it helps them kind of form a good sense of group identity, etc. After that, you also then need to take care of some business type things, right? So we want students to know, what are the rules of this group going to be? So are we going to, how are we going to communicate? When are things going to be due? How are we going to take care of business? We want to make sure that they establish those rules, and you might need to provide them with some specific suggestions of types of rules. Like, what's going to happen if someone comes to a meeting and they're not prepared? What happens if, someone doesn't do what they said they were supposed to do? What are the rules? How is this group going to function when those kinds of issues come up? So you want to be as preventive as possible. The other one is roles, and you want to make sure that students have clear roles of who's doing what. Now, one of the biggest problems with group work is that everyone takes it and they do a divide and conquer kind of approach. I'll do this, you do that, I'll do this, you do that. And that's not terrible to take the lead on, but what happens is then the others really are not doing that second part where they're really not teaching their other group members the content that they learned. So we just did a divide and conquer really with the Jigsaw Classroom, and it's not evil, but it's not productive if you don't do that teaching part. So if you never had that follow-up conversation, everything kind of falls apart. So group work is not meant to be less work, it's meant to be collaborative and productive work. So it's the same amount of work, but you're working together instead of independently. And I'm going to talk about roles in a minute. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And then obviously they need to know group work is work. Again, it's not less. It's still work, and it's another set of skills that they're learning. So they have to be ready to work, and they have to be ready to evaluate also. So they can't forget to remember that evaluation is an important part of the process. How's it going? Are we on track? Are we not on track? What needs to happen? So there are many different group roles that you can have. These are some of the ones that I talk about in the text. And this are obviously related to a presentation type group. But one that I want to draw your attention to is the questioner. This questioner role is really powerful because students tend to do what's called group think. Somebody says an idea, they jump on it. That's a fabulous idea. No one wants to say that that idea is terrible. Nobody wants to be combative. No one wants to put someone down. And we're not encouraging that, that you're putting someone down. But we do want to encourage critical thinking, and we don't want to encourage groupthink. So if you have a designated questioner in each group, what that person's role is, their job is to just say, are there any other approaches that might be equally beneficial or maybe even more beneficial? What are the cons of using this approach? So let's talk about that. So their job is to raise those questions for the group to really talk about. So I personally think that's one of the most powerful roles within the group that we can really have our students engage in. So teaching them how to be an effective group member and how to resolve conflicts when they arise, because they do arise sometimes, not everything works completely smoothly, can be a powerful thing. Now, what we're talking about, our group project has to do with a presentation. So as you know, in the textbook, there's a huge section on Mayer's multimedia principles and what works really well in terms of giving a presentation. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're teaching your students these strategies, and although they'll read about them in the book, I want you to certainly make them come alive in a classroom exercise. And some of it might be through lecture, that's fine, and then giving them a chance to process and dialogue about it. So the first one is Mayer really talks about how powerful images are. So images are super powerful. We're actually going to do an activity with images in just a little bit. So images are very powerful. So slides should be primarily an image. I always say that if Mayer was standing in the back of the room, we'd probably be applauding the slide. It is a giant image of an eyeball and a few words that describe it, right? So we have all heard about learning styles and how we learn best. Well, the research is pretty clear that we are actually more similar than different in terms of how we learn, although everyone focuses on the differences. And we all are going to learn best when a multisensory approach is used. So we all have many senses that we're taking information in through all of our senses, but the visual sense, unless you have some kind of a vision impairment or something, is going to be one of the most powerful ways that we take in information. There's a concept called the picture superiority effect, which basically means we remember pictures better than we remember words. So, and that's true for most of us. So we want our students to really make presentations that are going to be really powerful with giant, images that are related to the content. Not cute puppy dogs, It has to be related to the content. All right? The other principle is less is more. So none of the bells and whistles, we don't need all of that, spinning in and clapping for yourself and all this stuff that happens, all that animation usually lowers learning, distracts the learner instead of enhances learning. So it's really important that we're only focusing in on keywords, key images, and whatever is really important and necessary, and not doing all that extraneous stuff. Because Mayer's experimental studies have shown that that extraneous stuff reduces learning. Now, it doesn't mean you can never use, a little animation or something here or there, because if you're doing it very strategically, it might draw attention to it, which is going to be the next point. We do want to emphasize important points. So there are ways to do that, and maybe by having an image that kind of blows up really big might be a way to emphasize an important point. If you're using a graph or something, you want to use an arrow. Or if you're live and you're doing it, you can actually touch the screen. I always tell my students, they have like screen phobia. They'll be standing behind the podium over here looking at it like it's going to bite them. It's not. You can actually help us by pointing. You see right here, this is the part I want you to focus on. But sometimes it might be in an online environment where you're not there to do that. So you can do that either through like the inking where you're circling something, or using an arrow or some other way through the media to really kind of communicate what's really important. So these are important skills for students to understand. Another principle that Mayer talks about is I call it the be quiet principle. He calls it the redundancy principle. So I'll just give you a minute to read through this slide. So I actually tell my students it's called the shut up principle. They really remember that one. So basically, you don't want to talk over your slide. If you have to have a lot of words, then shut up. Preferably, it's better to talk with less words. That's better. It's more engaging to have an image behind you and words coming at you orally. But the idea here is we want our students to move away from the endless bullets. And I know why they do it. I know why I did it in the beginning, because I didn't know my content as well. And the more comfortable you get with the content, the easier it'll be to avoid slides that look like this. So, you won't need all those reminders because you'll know it. So it really goes back to the practice and preparation piece, right? The more you practice and prepare, the better off you're going to be, and you're going to pull off a much better presentation. And the last principle that Mayer talks about is the conversational language is much more powerful than formal language. So we want to get students to shift it into simple terminology, which again requires understanding on their part, right? So we want to bring this skill set to our students and make sure that they know how to present, they know how to function in a group. It's basically what you need to do is you need to think what skills do they need to complete this task, and then how am I going to give them those skills. And I have to tell you, the more and more that I'm doing this, I'm spending more and more time on group work in class, because then I'm there to help them learn those skills instead of me hoping it goes all well, when they leave, because often it doesn't. And it doesn't mean they're going to get to do the entire project in class, but by doing a lot of it in class, I get to see who's participating. It reduces the loafers. I get to help and support them. I mean, it really has been a very powerful way for them to learn these skill sets. And then to wrap this section up, I just want to talk to you about the process and the way that I do the presentation. By increasing the individual accountability for our students along the way, really makes it go and flow much better. So I have them find research articles. So they have to first go to the library, find the articles, and when they find the articles, I ask them each to bring 2 or 3 articles on a student success topic to class. The nature of the presentation is they're going to end up picking one to present on, but I don't really care if they're all on the same topic. That part doesn't matter to me because the topic is less important than the article, because the article is what it's really going to in essence become the topic. So I don't worry about them all being on the same page with what the topic is. But let's just say that you folks were all part of a team, that you were going to be working together in a group. You would all come to class with at least 2 to 3 articles. Now that's individual accountability, right? I can't just say, oh, let Zoe do it. Zoe always brings the best articles, or Lisa's always going to do it, or Jane's always going to do it. Everyone's got to bring articles. Then what I have is during class, I have you all look at all the articles, and then you decide as a group which article you want to use for your presentation. I come and help you, but I ask you to prioritize them. So which one is the one that you really want to do? And then I'll come around and I'll talk to you a little bit about it, and I'll look at it to make sure that it's within your zone of proximal development, something you could do, something we've kind of given you the background skills to tackle, and also that your classmates will care about it, because we are using classmate time. We're using their learning time. We want to make sure it's something that they're going to find valuable. So I would then kind of decide, we would together decide which article you're going to use. Then once you're done with the article selection, now it's time for you to independently work again. So now you pretend you don't have a group, and you go home, and you independently summarize it using those exploring the research worksheets, and you summarize the article by yourself. And I collect that and I grade that independently. So again, we're making sure everyone's individually contributing to this project. But then what I have you do is I have you come together and you bring your articles, your summaries together, and you review to make sure you all have it. Here's where that interdependence comes in. We need each other. We need to all make sure we get it. So if Lisa wrote down something that Jane didn't write down, then Jane's going to say, well, maybe we also want to include this piece to it. I think that we want to add that element in. So basically, you now have class time again, and the point of this part of class time is for you to master the article. So you're helping each other become expert on the article. And you have me as a resource again. I'm coming around checking, and I've already seen your papers, so I know which groups are struggling more than others with getting the content across. And now at this point, you kind of hopefully are walking away from class with a good understanding of all the how the study was conducted and what they found. After you're done with that, now you're going to independently work again. So now you go off by yourself again and you create a PowerPoint presentation for the article. And here's why I want you to do that independently. I want you to practice using Mayor. I want you to practice your skills. And I want everyone to contribute. Otherwise, the person who's best at PowerPoint takes on the whole task, and everyone else just hangs back and claps. That's not what we want. So the idea here is again, promoting that individual accountability. And then I could, again, take that and grade that and make sure that they've done that. Then they get together as a group again. Now it's time for you to work together, and you take the best of the best. Oh, Lisa really did a great graph on this. I think that really communicates it well. Oh my gosh, Jane, really, you captured the question much clearer than I did. So let's make sure we take your slide for that. That was the best image ever. That really kind of tied and connected well. So let's throw that in. So now you're working, taking the best of the best to compile a group PowerPoint presentation that you'll use behind you as you present. And then you're really going to practice, and you're going to work on how can you best present this. And then I think most of you know, I borrow this technique from Barbara Millis, who does a lot of work in the world of collaborative group work. On the day of the presentation, I randomly assign you your part. Oh, what? Yes, students are like, what? They're freaking out, they're anxious. But what I tell them is that really view this as an individual presentation. Because if you view it as an individual presentation, but you have a support team, that's way better than an individual presentation with no support team, right? So you pretend it's your own project, but you have people helping you with it. And then on the day of your presentation, I'm just going to relieve you of some of your duties. You don't have to do it all. You just have to do a piece of it. And that mindset shift, it does help a little bit. Students are anxious, but I tell them that you need to know the whole article. If you don't, you're missing out on too much. So I don't want to rob you of that learning experience. You really will learn a lot more this way. So that's kind of how I structure the group presentation. Does anyone have any questions or comments about that?
I'm curious, how do you combat, because I had this happen the students, just to kind of change it up a little bit, maybe they'll help each other out. And I found that when it came to doing the parts, they did their independent slides. When it came to putting all the other, pretty much took the person who was the best and just did that one. Like really make a lot of changes by incorporating it. How do you suggest combating?
Well, I mean,
let's just keep it that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, it may be that that is the one that best captures it. So I don't know that that's terrible. I mean, I think that the point is if they started there and they didn't independently do their own work at all, that would have been really problematic in my opinion. But if they've all contributed in some way and someone really did do it the best, I don't think that that's terrible because now they saw a more positive model than what they had. The key is for them to all work together to really learn the content so that they can present it. Because you do want the best slides. And if there was a superstar in the group who created the best slides, well, that might be the one, But I would go around and say, I'd make sure because maybe there was a slide here that might have been better for that particular section. So I do want them to walk through that process together. Any other questions or comments about that?